Brian Smith here, and welcome to the DreamPath podcast, where I try to get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. My goal is to demystify and humanize the creative process and make it accessible to everyone. Now let's jump in. Today we're talking to Hiba Jameel. Hiba is an Iraqi-American artist based in Seattle. Today we are going to talk to her about her journey as a child from a war-torn region of Iraq to becoming a successful painter in the United States. You can find images of Hiba's work on her website at hibajameel.com, HIBAJAMEEL.com, and you can see her work in person at the Gallery Erotic in downtown Seattle, Pioneer Square, where some of her work will be showing through April, I believe, leading up to the Seattle Erotic Art Festival, which begins in April as well. Hiba's paintings can be striking. An article in the Seattle-based publication, The Stranger, from August of 2018 described her work as follows: the kind of painting that stops you in your tracks. On her website, her approach to art is described as follows: Hiba Jameel's art serves as a way for her to process her world, whether it is to fulfill her civic duty by criticizing the political climate, or to express the sensitive, sensual facets of life through painting flayed, beautiful, nude figures, or painting to heal from her childhood wounds and engage others in art making via conducting interactive art events. You will see little glass cups decorated with gold in Hiba's work, along with some mushroom clouds, gold leaf, and lots of nude figures. Hiba uses the traditional teacup she grew up drinking from as a symbol of her heritage and as a part of her identity. She processes the world around her by painting her experiences using distinct brushstrokes, rich color palette, and exaggerated figures. Her paintings have a luster finish, gold and luminescent hues. The human figure to her is a body of language that she can use to interpret experiences and convey messages. Hiba, welcome to the DreamPath podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'll start off by saying that I attended, as you know, your opening last night at the gallery, and I was very impressed with not only your work, but by the response to your work from the people who showed up. I was there for a couple of hours and had a chance to talk to the crowd and listen to them and kind of get a sense of what their response was. And, you know, I will never profess to be an expert in art or what makes art good or bad, if that's even possible to judge art that way. But I've heard that the purpose of art is to create a reaction of some kind in the viewer. And I saw that happening last night. I mean, people were affected by your work. So thank you for inviting me to that opening, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. And thank you for coming. Actually, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you saying that you paid attention to the reactions. I was too nervous. It was my opening, and I had to make sure I said hi to everybody that came in and, you know, that I knew. And I didn't really get a chance to observe people's reactions as much as you did. And maybe I was avoiding that.
Yeah.
Subconsciously.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was also the setting was just incredible. That gallery, the brick walls and the high ceilings, and then, you know, all of the other galleries around it. Just a really special event in a neat setting. So
absolutely, Pioneer Square is very beautiful. It's one of those little precious areas in Seattle, I would say.
Yeah. So before we get into your background, tell us how you got to that point last night where you are showing your art in this wonderful gallery with these admiring people coming in and looking at your work and obviously appreciating your artistry. How did you make that connection with that gallery?
So it's networking, essentially, but it's not something I necessarily planned for. I think the key is in the fact that I am doing something I truly, truly love, something I am truly passionate about, something that I jump out of my bed every morning looking forward to it. It's this thing that I do that I had no problem canceling plans, no problem dropping TV. And I think this passion, combined with some time management and putting myself and my work really out there and bringing my personality to it as well, in terms of being a friendly person. And I am an extroverted person. I think that works in my favor. Being extroverted and being able to talk to people and just easygoing in that sense, I think that helps a lot. Some of my fellow artists tend to be introverted and they just kind of focus on creating the work and they don't really like to engage with others as much. And a lot of times, a lot of artists have that nature. I just don't happen to be that way. And it worked for the best. And how I got connected to Gallery Erotic is I was involved in A&T Gallery, Art Not Terminal Gallery in Seattle Center. This is where I started. That was my launching pad. I love that place. I was on the board of directors for about a year, and I'm just taking a little bit of time off right now. But I hope to resume later on this year. It's a nonprofit gallery for emerging artists, and it's all volunteer-based. And I was part of that gallery, and I met some fellow artists there who recommended I submit my work to the Seattle Erotic Art Festival last year. And after I did that, Sophia, the director, she fell in love with my paintings, and my work got juried into the SEAF, the Seattle Erotic Art Festival. And I was invited to go to the reception and to the festival itself. And I was there and I further talked to them, and they were all wonderful people, the directors of the art festival. And we became good friends. And then later on, they opened a physical location, Gallery Erotic, and I was one of the artists that they invited to have their work there almost every month since they opened. I've had my work there. And so in December, I had this idea. I was dropping off a painting to Sophia at Gallery Erotic, and I said, I have this idea for a show that I'm going to do anyway, whether it's with you guys or with somewhere else, but I'm going to tell you the idea and see what you think about it. And it's the amorousness of the motherly figure. It's celebrating full-figured females, who look like mothers, and kind of celebrating that kind of femininity instead of focusing on, mommy makeovers or looking like you didn't have any kids. Or no, there's nothing wrong with that. You could do what you want. But in my dialogue, this is what I wanted to talk about. In my story, in this particular show, I wanted to highlight and talk about the beauty and the eroticism in full-figured women who have a motherly figure. And Sophia was like, oh my God, I love the idea. Yes, let's do it. And then she got back to me 2 days later. She said, okay, March. Well, let's do it for March. And so that's what happened. And here I am.
Now, did you have all of your paintings ready to go when she said, all right, it's a go, we're going to start you in March?
No, not even close. I was actually working on a project with an artist from New York. He's an Iraqi American artist. He's also a professor at NYU, and I was heavily involved in that project. And it's a little bit different than what I normally do, but it's also an art project, let's say. And I didn't start painting for this show until the first week of February.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
There are quite a few paintings in there.
Yeah, I tend to work under pressure. And I work better under pressure. And I probably should use some slowing down. But usually some of my best works come out under pressure.
So do you have a studio that you work in, or do you work out of your apartment?
So I do work at home sometimes, and I do have a studio at it's called Bemis Arts Building in Soto near the stadium. It's a shared space studio, so I share with other artists, but usually I work there. I saw that show. I would say most of the pieces were created in that studio. I was putting about 10 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed. I'm not an art aficionado, and I have very little knowledge of the art world. But I did take an art appreciation class in college, and I did do some painting, just as a hobby. And one thing I noticed about your work is the size of the work is, larger than when you look at your website. You just don't appreciate how big these paintings are.
Yes. Painting is a physical act for me. So I paint standing up. I like that movement. I like that gesture. I like the intensity. I do sometimes sit down and work on a small, very detailed area if I have to. But for the most part, I'm standing up, moving my arms up and down and just getting into that rhythm. And it did cause me some physical pain. I was actually seeing a kind of like a kinesiologist for my arm, and I had it taped up last month.
A painting injury?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. My right arm just gave out. It just could not take it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you, because of the size of the canvas, some of these are 5 feet tall by 4 feet wide. Are you using large brushes with large brush strokes?
Yeah. Most of the brushes I use are large. A lot of them I buy them at Home Depot. And sometimes I use medium-sized brushes. Sometimes I use a palette knife. Sometimes I just take the paint as is and drip it on the painting. It depends on what I'm doing at the time.
Well, it sounds almost like industrial, like the tools that you're using to paint. Because my vision of like how an artist gets their tools ready for, or a painter gets their tools ready to paint is, they go to the art store and they pick out these really expensive tiny brushes of all different shapes. It sounds like you're going for larger tools to
I
put
do that
paint
too,
on.
though. I do that too. So I do go to the art store and pick those expensive, detailed, especially for oil painting. It's much more delicate, and then you have to be really careful about the bristles of the brush and if hairs come out from it, and how you clean them. Oil painting is a ritual by itself, so there's that. So I do that, and I did that, but I also do the other more physical aspect of painting. Like I said, I have to really enjoy what I'm doing. I'm one of those people who would only do something if they're really, really passionate about it. And then once I do it 100% or 200%. And so for me, when I wanted to do painting, I took oil painting. I took an oil painting workshop with one of the best oil painters in the area. His name is David Gray, and he gives workshops here in Seattle, and he goes to Italy and to France to give portrait oil painting workshops. And he kind of got me started on the oil painting, and that actually happened in January. So I'm very new to oil painting. I know, it's a shock. I know, but I've been painting in acrylic my whole life. So it was just a matter of changing the medium, not as much as the technique or how you paint a face or how you, I know the shadows, the values, I know all that stuff. So it was just, how do you use this new medium? And I fell in love with it. It was amazing. With oil painting, there are different ways to paint, obviously. You could do hyper-realistic. You could do a little bit more modern, abstract. You could just play with it. And you do need to get the nicer, more fine. You have to get really nice quality paint, nice brushes. And there is a method to do it, to go about it. Where with acrylic and with what I was doing previously, there are no rules, pretty much. And that's the joy of it, is really, you could just do what you want. And I think part of my success, as you had, I don't think, I don't look at myself as, oh, I'm successful now. I'm more like, oh, I'm kind of where I want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not necessarily, I'm not necessarily aiming to be successful. I'm really immersed in enjoying the process. So it's not even, I'm not even thinking about it.
You're not thinking about where you're going. It's just, it's the journey.
I am,
there.
but not in the sense that, oh, I want to be this shining star. It's not really like that as much as, what am I going to contribute? What's my contribution? What am I going to give people? How good of a job am I going to be doing? Am I improving? Am I moving forward in my skills? And that is a priority. And that's what I think about all the time versus, am I going to be successful or not?
Right.
Yeah. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I attribute part of whatever you consider as success to my love for freedom. And because I was painting without any rules per se, and I was just kind of doing my own thing, I think that helped me flourish because it allowed me that space to be creative, experiment, and bring out some brush strokes and techniques that I probably wouldn't have done if I had, if I had been taught by certain someone or went to art school.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me that you would, if you discover painting on your own without the constraints of a curriculum, and this is what impressionism is, this is what expressionism is, this is what, figurative painting is. And you are discovering that on your own without these labels and rules, that I would think that you're more likely to find your way to something that's truly authentic to you. Do you feel like that's what happened for you?
That's precisely what happened. That's exactly what happened. And that is one of the reasons why I probably never took the plunge to go to art school. I really wanted to do my own thing. I always said that art is the thing I love the most in this world, and I don't want anyone to tell me how to do it. I really want to do it the way I want to do it, the way I feel it. And a lot of people don't like to hear that. And a lot of art, professionals or people who went to school and studied that don't like to hear that as well. And to each their own. There is huge value in getting education in art. I am not against that per se, but me personally, to what it pertains to my own journey and how I was brought up and my upbringing and my background, I don't think I need it.
Well, you said that you don't want somebody telling you how to do your art. How do you respond, or do you even respond or listen to art critics? If
I ask someone about their opinion, then I am receptive of what they have to tell me. Then I'm ready to hear it. But I typically don't pay that much attention when people just kind of comment and tell me, oh, you should have done this, you should have not done that, or you should have taken this off. I'm like, okay, whatever. But I don't really. But if for example, I think it was back in December, or I don't recall. It was a few months ago. I'm a member at COCA, Center on Contemporary Arts in Pioneer Square, another gallery. And they have these jury panels twice a year where they look at your portfolio. You basically go to get feedback on your work. And so I go to these things. I put myself out there. I put my work out there. And I ask these people whom I value their opinion, tell me how I can improve. What do you see that, how do you perceive my work and which improvements can I do, etc. And I did that about 3 times last year. But it's usually targeted. It's usually, the first one I went to was with a gallery in Kirkland. I can't recall the name. yeah, they had a jury panel, and I went for portfolio review. And I stood there and I talked about my work, and I had my work physically there with me. And it was a panel of about 5 individuals who are all gallerists, art critic, collectors, and they gave me wonderful feedback. And the ones that I was sensitive about, I just went home and thought about them, and I actually took them constructively over time. And I didn't really pay that much attention to the positive praise. Because I'm like, I just want to know how I can improve. So
you're a true suffering artist.
I think you can say that. Yeah. You can say
don't
that.
listen to the praise.
Yeah.
Well, I really don't study art criticism or read it. So is there a lot of art criticism out there that actually you end up seeing, whether purposefully or accidentally, about your own work?
I feel there are some self-prophesized people
who call themselves an art critic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there are also some true art critics that I just recently had a writer / art critic from Baghdad who saw my work. And keep in mind, being an Iraqi woman who paints full-on nude figures is a huge thing in the Middle East. So I've got emails and messages over social media. Why do you do this? Why are you, painting nude women? This is a huge thing for them. And being a female artist who paints nude women is also it's just what's in your brain? How are you thinking? It's very hypersexualized. I don't necessarily paint about the sexuality of the figures. I just paint the figures and their beauty. And it's not necessarily about sexuality, and they don't understand that. But, that being said, there are a lot of educated people who appreciate art, who value it and value the rebellious act that I'm doing. And one of them is this writer who reached out to me, and he was he gave me some feedback on my work, but it was very constructive, short, concise, down to the point. And I think the feedback he gave it on a painting that wasn't finished yet. And then when it was finished, he was like, "Oh, okay, I see where you're going with this." But initially he thought it was finished. But then he wrote this long article in Arabic, of course, about how I am painting the figure, but not the hypersexualized. It's basically exactly what I just described. And I was surprised how he just got it like this. He just got it. And it was a beautiful article in Arabic that I had to get someone's help to, Arabic is a very delicate language, and, it's fancy. And so I'm like, what do these words mean? Sounds interesting. And I wish I could get it translated somehow. But he praised my work pretty much. And he talked about that I'm daring, and that as a female Iraqi artist, they paint all these nude women and nude figures, and challenging the viewer's point of view and the viewer's perception of art. And so there was that kind of positive criticism. I get sometimes from more experienced artist friends that I've known over the years. They tell me some little things here and there. But usually they're very sensitive about how they say it, which is beautiful because we all understand each other, and we all know that when you create a piece of art, this is your baby. So you have to be careful about how you address it. Luckily, I haven't had... let me back up a little bit. The Trump painting I did last year, that one.
The one that's I really don't care
to
you?
Yes,
okay.
That one got a lot of hate. And I don't know if that's criticism or that's emotional reactions, but I was just getting, one person wrote, "Isn't it nice that you could create this kind of work? Now pack up your bags and leave if you don't like this country."
Huh?
It was amazing, that kind of stuff. And some people, they're like, "No, you have it all misunderstood. You don't know what you're talking about, or you're taking advantage of the situation to bring up your name." And it was a lot of heat. But there was equal or more amount of positive feedback and people relating to the art and having it actually move them so much. So,
well, it's very evocative, provocative
it
piece.
is.
And if you're interested, the listeners who are interested in seeing it, you can go to her website and check it out. It's really
currently at
pretty cool.
It's currently at West of Lenin Gallery in Fremont.
Oh, nice.
There's a theater, West of Lenin Theater. They also have a gallery, and it's showing there until the end of March. So people can reach out and see when they're open to go check it out themselves. But yeah, I mean, that piece was created out of pure passion. I had a reaction to the events that led me to paint that piece, and I was actually painting it in tears. And it was very, very hard for me to paint it. It was not easy to paint. I mean, I have a 4-year-old and I was just spiraling. Because I'm an immigrant. I was an immigrant myself. I had to travel and go through that. And I can't imagine what it would be like for me to go through what these people were going through.
Well, the little child that's in the center of the painting, it's heartbreaking.
It's very heartbreaking.
Yeah. And I think you really captured a lot of emotion with that painting, and obviously triggered some Trump supporters too at the same time, which is great. Now, before we get into your background in Iraq and your journey here, before I forget, did you consider your work to be erotic artwork before the Erotic Art Festival kind of took you under their wing with this gallery and the show that you got into? Is that a category that you even thought about when you were painting?
No, I was just really painting what I wanted to paint.
Right.
Didn't really think of a certain category, but it was just more like there's a certain audience that would particularly appreciate these paintings.
Right.
And so I submitted my work to them, but it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to become an erotic artist or painting erotic figures. That wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. It's just what I saw something, I wanted to paint it. I did it, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were born in Iraq?
Yes, I was born in Baghdad.
And what year?
83.
Okay. And how long did you live in Iraq before coming to the United States?
We lived there until 94. I was 11, and that's when we left. Pretty much escaped Iraq.
So that was during the Gulf War? Or
after the Gulf War.
After?
Yeah.
And what do you remember about the Gulf War? Were you old enough to really have vivid memories?
Oh, yes. It's funny you say that because I was asked to paint about my experience in the Gulf War last year. And I had a joint show at A&T with another fellow artist. It was also in March of last year. And I painted about my experience in that war. I remember it very clearly. I remember the first night. I remember how it ended. I remember what happened every single night. It's embedded in my memory. And painting about it was very therapeutic. Because I went on my whole life thinking I'm okay. But I'm really not. I have PTSD from the, loud noises. And it's not as severe as someone who was participating in a war, like a veteran or something. But it is a mild form, I guess, of PTSD.
So you still feel the emotion of fear and trauma from those experiences in Iraq to this day, and you think it's probably some form of PTSD that you have?
No, I was diagnosed.
Oh, you were actually diagnosed? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's terrifying. I was probably 8 at the time or 7, and I remember I didn't know what was going to happen. I woke up in the middle of the night. We lived with my grandparents at the time. My parents were separated. And actually, my dad was probably in the war as well, now that I remember. He was also part of the, you don't have an option over there. If they go to war, everybody goes to war. Like, all the men have to get recruited to the military to go to the war. So I think my dad was also a soldier. And we were at my grandparents' house and we woke up in the middle of the night. And I remember just hearing very loud noises. And all my uncles and aunts and everybody's running in all directions across the house. And everyone was saying, you need to stay in the corners. Stay in the corners. Because if they bomb the house, the corners don't fall. And that's what we did. We found a corner. My grandmother held me and my little sister, and we sat in the corner. And my mom and her were kind of alternating and taking turns. And we would sit. And I remember the corner that I sat at, I was across from a very large window. And I saw every night that window was propped, the blinds were propped open. There was no electricity because they bombed the electricity unit or whatever. So it's
took out the power grid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I remember looking at that window and just seeing all the bombs go down and looking at the little lights as they go down and then waiting to hear and feel the effect of it. And that would go on every night, like from sunset until, I don't know, the morning or something. And there was no war during the day. They didn't bomb us. I don't know why. There was a reason. I know there's a reason for it, but it was sleep deprivation and fear and everything all at once. And when I used to get scared, my family would say, "Oh, it's think of the Atari games that you play. If you remember the Atari."
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They're like, "This looks like the Atari games. Think about the Atari games." And so when I was asked to paint, that's the first thing that came to my head. Oh, that's the Atari War. And so I called the exhibit Atari Paints.
I was wondering about that because I looked at your website and I see the Atari. Now, Atari Paints, it's called? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, you say when you were asked to paint, was there a moment in your life where someone asked you to paint something?
Well, this particular artist is an American ex-veteran who paints about the American soldiers who died in the Iraqi war, and he paints them as black crows. So each painting would have a certain number of black crows, and those are the soldiers that died in the war. And so for each year, he would have a painting that has a certain number of birds. And he wanted to have an exhibit, and he asked me, because he's painting about kind of his reaction or his view as an American to the Iraqi-American conflict, and he wanted me to paint about my view as an Iraqi person to the American-Iraqi conflict. And so I did. I painted about my experience. Not necessarily about what I think is right or wrong, not necessarily about who's at fault, none of that. I just painted about what I experienced as an individual going through that hardship.
When was that?
The show?
Yeah, like when did you start painting about that experience?
February of last year.
Oh, okay. All right. So when you're 11 in Iraq and with your grandparents and your parents are separated, at that time, were you into art in any meaningful way?
I was painting since I was 3. I would say my mom was a hobbyist, art hobbyist at the time. My uncles, aunts, everybody in that household somehow knew how to draw or paint. And it was just so easy to them. None of them went to school for it. They're just, I don't know, I guess it's genetic. And so I was surrounded by all these people who just, it was easy for them to sit and do a face portrait of each other. And so I think I also had it in me, and I picked it up and I continued to enjoy, and my mother was a huge part of that, obviously. She went on later and got her degree in fine art here in the US. But at the time, she would buy me all kinds of markers and watercolors and, paint, and would encourage me and direct me on how to draw, how to paint, and kind of like, okay, Let's try doing things from still life. Let's do things from pictures. She started in the beginning to encourage me to replicate the drawings in the coloring books. And then I graduated to painting from maybe my books, like the little, story books. And then, try to draw from pictures and then try to do still life. And she'd give me feedback. And for me, it was the thing that I went to her to get her approval and to feel happy. Oh, this is great. This looks good. Okay, let's do this. Let's try this. And so that was my thing when I was a child.
So you did go to art school.
Yeah, I guess I was homeschooled.
You're homeschooled, yeah.
Homeschooled art school, yeah.
So you were painting in Iraq since the age of 3. And how did you make your way to the United States?
I wouldn't say I was painting. I was more drawing and coloring and just kind of playing with all these. It was really drawing. Those years were honing my drawing skills, figures, faces, anything. I started to paint in high school here. That's when I was introduced to painting. In high school, I took an art class and I got introduced to acrylic. And that was back in the year of 99, I would say. And that's when I started to actually paint, like have paint and paint brushes and canvas. That's when I started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you were 11, is that when you left Iraq?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We had to escape, actually. We had problems with the previous regime. My uncles at the time, one of them was working for the government, and then he decided he doesn't want to work there anymore. And they don't really take that very well. You can't start working with the government and then not work. And he was young and naive. And I think he just wanted the prestige of getting that job, not realizing the consequences that could have on anyone. And I think there's other factors, if I recall. But anyways, he wanted to stop working, and then he started to run away, and they would catch him, throw him in jail as a punishment. And then the last thing was they wanted to cut his ear off. Yeah, that was a thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, that was a thing. They cut. Yeah, that's.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but it's just
that's
like
Saddam.
gallows humor, I guess.
That's what he did at the time, and the judge ruled that that's what they're going to do to him. So he ran away, and we smuggled him out of Iraq.
So that was a sentence by a court.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Precisely. And so he left Iraq, and they kept on coming in looking for him. So we would be at night, and we'd have like midnight, and we'd have 10, men dressed like, military with weapons and everything coming from the top of the house. Kind of like a sudden search. I don't know, ambush search, something like that, looking for him. And they wanted to take my grandfather at the time. I remember my grandfather was paralyzed since the Gulf War. It's a very interesting, complicated story. That same uncle during the Gulf War, he was working for the national security, and he disappeared completely. So every time they go ask for him, they say, "Where is he?" They're like, "He's the son of the government, not your son." So for 6 months, he was just not there. So my grandparents thought that he died. And so my grandfather got depressed. He got 3 strokes back to back. He got paralyzed. This all happened around the Gulf War. I mean, that war had a lot of effects on my family. It's in so many ways, financial, social, I guess, everything. And so,
well, your world is literally crumbling around you.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, so fast forward to the day when these people came and searching for my uncle. They wanted to take my grandfather until we bring my uncle back. And they begged them. They said, he's sick. He can't even talk because he lost his speech and he's paralyzed. We can't take him. Just give us a few days. So they said, okay. They left, and we left the second day to Jordan. That's when we kind of escaped. We made fake passports, all of us, because none of us can travel. Because there's a sentence. If one person in the family works in the government, the rest of the family is involved. That's just how it is.
You're in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we had to fake passports and names, and then we smuggled kind of ourselves. Well, not really, just kind of like traveled to Jordan, and we didn't tell anybody. Nobody knew. None of our relatives knew. And we vanished, and we never went back. That was in 94.
And Jordan was a friendly country at the time, and that you were safe in, at least?
Yeah. From that sense, yeah, it was pretty safe. We stayed in Jordan for about 3 to 4 months, and then after that, we went to Syria. And we stayed in Syria for about 3 years, and then we were refugees with the United Nations. My mom was working as a reporter in opposition to Saddam's regime, opposition newspapers and magazines. She was a reporter in those. And then
in Syria,
in Syria. So they are newspapers run by Iraqi opposition parties to Saddam's regime. At the time, Syria and Iraq didn't have good ties. That was back in early 90s, I would say. And we were considered women at risk by the United Nations. And my mom really wanted to bring us to the US. She wouldn't accept going anywhere else. No Europe, no Canada, no Australia, no nothing. She said the US, that's where we're going. And we waited until the committee from the US was there. And then we finally came here in the year of 98.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a journey.
Yeah.
So do you remember the 3 years that you were in Syria? My vision of Syria now is just an awful, war-torn region with, ISIS and Assad and gas attacks. And was it a fairly safe environment for your family back then?
Not even remote to what you're describing. It was a bliss. It was peaceful. It was butterflies and flowers. It was beautiful. I had, I would say, probably better time than I had in Iraq. In Iraq, when I was very little, I remember, but then I think it was second grade is when we had the war and things went really downhill. So I didn't really get to enjoy Iraq that much, but I enjoyed Syria. It was so much fun. Oh my gosh. We loved it. We were always going out, going on little trips, even though the situation was difficult. My mom had to work 3 jobs and we were uncertain of what's going to happen to us, and we were unstable, and we're waiting for this committee, waiting to hear from the United Nations. Where are we going to end up? We don't know. But we were able to fully enjoy Syria. It was beautiful. It was literally flowers and butterflies. That's what I remember.
Were you bummed to leave and have to go somewhere else?
No. I was looking forward to coming to the US. I was really fed up with the patriarchal society that we have in Middle East. I was fed up.
So you were 11 when you went to Syria and you were 14 when you left.
Yeah.
Right. So between 11 and 14, it sounds like you developed this awareness of the patriarchal, that it
and
happens,
I just could not wait to get to the other side of the world where this does not exist.
Where there's freedom.
Exactly.
Gender, freedom and equality.
Exactly. Where no catcalling, no, objectifying of the female and minimizing what women are and not to say that everybody is like that, but that's the general. And I think it's not just in the Middle East. I think it's in other parts of the world as well.
Well, it's in the United States too.
Yeah, but to a much less extent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people are much aware and vocal about it. And
at least there's a dialogue going on in the United States about it where, it's a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We've come a long way at least.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. Recently, it's been kind of wishy-washy.
2 steps back.
A little bit, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, we can do something about it here.
Mm-hmm. So you have this awareness and you have this idea of what America offered in terms of freedom and equality. And then where did you land, by the way? Where did you end up in America?
So the United Nations took us to Michigan. I don't know why they picked that state, but we went to Michigan and there's a huge Arab population there. But funny enough, when they took us there, we didn't actually end up living in that area. We lived somewhere half hour away from it. So we didn't really get to, later we learned of it. We learned that there's this city called Durban that has all these Arabs and etc.
And did it, I guess, match up with your expectations of what America was going to be? Michigan?
There was a culture shock and there was a learning curve. And keep in mind, none of us spoke a word of English.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And your parents were still separated at this point, right?
Yeah. My dad at the time, I think he was still in Iraq. So it was my mom, my grandparents, and my sister and I. And
none of you spoke English.
None of us spoke anything. And we had to learn it from scratch here. I think people outside the U.S. sometimes have the impression of the U.S. either looking like California or New York. But then there's that in between that nobody talks about, right? So when we came and we went to Michigan, we're like, what is going on? Why does it look like this? Like, because it was the suburbs.
Yeah.
And we weren't exposed to it. So the expectations, it's difficult. No matter how you do it, how you put it. As an immigrant, the first few years in the US, you're starting from below zero, not even at zero. You're starting from below zero. Your furniture is from Goodwill. It's donated. You're getting government assistance. You have a job. You're trying to learn the language. I remember I was in high school and I didn't speak any English. So I would open the dictionary and try to translate everything. And, I was lucky to have some good tutors that were bilingual and who helped me a little bit. But it was just really hard. I would say the first 7 years were really difficult. And then it got better and better and better after that.
So when you got to high school, right when you got to Michigan, you were 14. So you're like a freshman.
15. I was 15.
15.
Yeah.
Freshman in high school.
I was 10th grade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And did they offer tutors in high school for you that would help you get through those English language classes?
Yes, they did. They had an ESL class. They had someone who would, they had things in place for that. So it was really helpful. They were very nice.
And that's where you started painting on canvas, acrylic paints.
I remember the art teacher loved me. She commissioned me to paint on a door that I think it's still there until now in high school. It was called Berkeley High School in Michigan. And my friend and I...
In what town in Michigan?
Berkeley.
Oh, in Berkeley, Michigan. Yeah. In Berkeley High School. Okay,
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, and we painted a door and, she introduced to Cubism and it was just a fun class. Yeah.
And from high school, where'd you go next?
So we moved a little bit in Michigan. We moved to a different city and then I moved to a different high school. After that, I started at Henry Ford Community College, and I didn't know what my major would be. When I was in middle school, I told my mother, my late mother, I told her that I wanted to become an artist, and she said no.
Even though she taught you how to be an artist.
Yeah. Well, she was afraid. She wanted to make sure that I have like a stable income. We had a rough background. We had a rough life. She wanted to make sure I have a secured future. So I get it. I get where she came from. And I also can't deny the fact that I did have a genuine interest and a part of me who wanted to do things and learn things other than art. And so I started as a computer science major. Then I took this biology class and I got really curious about how everything happens in the body. And I wanted to know down to the T how energy gets transferred between cells and how when we eat food, does it get broken down and becomes energy in the body and how we process it on a cellular level. I wanted to zoom in all the way microscopically and understand things. And then I was recommended to study biochemistry to learn those things because I kept on asking questions. And I ended up tutoring that class, biology. And I studied biochemistry and cell biology. And then I moved from Michigan. I finished my degree at UCSD, University of California, San Diego. And that's what I studied, biochemistry and cell biology. And then I did my master's in nutrition science and policy at Tufts University in Boston.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Ambitious. Yeah.
Yeah. It was more fueled by genuine interest, really in the subject matter. I really wanted to know how these things worked. And then when I graduated my master's, while I was going through my master's, a lot of life-altering things happened. I had my first child. My mom had cancer and then passed away from cancer. And I was kind of going through the motions with her. And then after she passed away, I focused on finishing up my degree. I graduated. And after I graduated, I said, I'm going to paint.
You got your bachelor's in bio,
and master's, yeah,
and then your master's in nutritional science, and
nutrition science and policy.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, and then I said I'm gonna paint, and so that's what I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what year did you graduate with the master's degree?
2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you make this decision to paint, and what is the plan though? I mean, I understand, the desire, the goal, this is what I want to do. I want to paint. But what was the plan to actually make that happen and be able to care for your child? Or do you have more than one child?
No, just one.
So care for your child and survive.
So I was married at the time, and my husband had a good job. And so, we weren't pressed financially per se. But I didn't even have a plan. The way it started is that I came across an ad in the year of 2016. It was called Art Rising by Lake Union Chamber of Commerce. They were opening Denny Park, and they were looking for artists who would do an interactive art in the park during the opening ceremony. And so I applied for that. And I created a project, and I was a little bit triggered by the elections and all the propaganda that was going on. And after I saw people's response to my interactive art event, that gave me that kind of, it was that little, whisper from the universe, kind of. It was just that, look here. Look what's happening. People were in delight. They loved the project. They loved being part of the art. And I was surprised by their reaction. I had no idea people were so perceptive, and, they loved art. And that really encouraged me to rethink my art and rethink this little hobby that I do on the side to decorate my home. Maybe it will be something bigger. And so after I did that, what I did is, at the time, I called it Insan. Insan in Arabic means human. I had a very large painting. It was 6 feet in width, I would say length. And it was 4 feet in width. And I had a light source. And so what I did is I would ask people to pose in front of the light source, and then I would trace their shadow on the canvas. And so I had all these silhouettes on top of each other of all these different kinds of people. And then all the differences in sizes and genders and whatever, all the lines merged together and created this really beautiful imagery. And the point of that was that we're all connected no matter how different we are. We're all human. We all want the same things. We're all ants chasing the same thing. And so when I was recruiting people in the park, when people would come by, oh, what are you doing? I'm doing this art project. Would you like to be a part of it? And when I explained it to them, they're like, yeah, we love this. Let's do it. And so that was really nice. It was a beautiful, it had like a beautiful feedback. It was just amazing. And so after that, I had in the previous few years shown at Ant Art Nocturnal Gallery. But then I learned about their relocation to Seattle Center. It's in Seattle Center, right by the International Fountain. So I pitched an idea. I sent a message to their social media, and I said, hey, I did this interactive art event with South Lake Union Chamber of Commerce, and I think your gallery location would be great for it if I do it there. Are you guys open to it? They invited me to the board. I pitched the idea to the board, and then eventually I got on the board of directors, and I was heavily involved in that gallery. And then from there, it was more like, okay, I'll look for a job and I'll do this. But then the art kept on getting better responses than my job search. And I sold a piece. And the month after, the first time I showed with them was the year of 2017. I think it was October, I sold that piece. And then November, I sold another piece. And so I was like, okay, something is happening here. You know, granted, they weren't like, it was I think the first one was like $300. The second one was like $400. It wasn't like something, but it was just encouraging to see it through. And it was encouraging to see people's reactions to my work. And so I continued to create more art and look for a job. And then the art kept on happening more than the job. And it just kept on flowing. And then I was applying to shows and I was getting in and I was getting feedback. And then I launched my website and I got even more feedback and I saw people's reactions and then I sold more work. And my prices kept on, climbing up. And I would say it's a beautiful slow upward slope that was happening. In terms of how much work I was putting in, people's reactions, how much work I was selling, and the other galleries that wanted to show my work, and then I had that person ask me to do the show with him in March, and I did that, and people's response was amazing. And then right after that, I had a contract with a gallerist in Italy, and I took three paintings from the Atari Paint series to Italy to show at art fairs. They're still there. And it just kept on getting. And then I got sponsored by the Office of Arts and Culture to do. So aside from painting, I also do interactive art events about using art as a form of therapy. And the first one was sponsored by Art with Heart. It's a nonprofit organization that uses art for healing for children who come from homes that have a lot of trauma. So it was called Shades of Emotions. That was in December of 2017, I believe. And then after that, I got sponsored by the Office of Arts and Culture to do another interactive art event, which I will repeat again this year. I did that last May. It was called Psychosomatic. And it's about painting your pain. Let's say someone has an anxiety attack, and then they start to get a headache. So they would paint that headache on a figure that I had already started for them. So you saw all these figures that I had started, and then you see people's contributions on top of them.
Yeah. What does that headache look like?
Exactly. Yeah. Or someone else said, when I get stressed out, my left arm starts to hurt. So they go paint on the left arm of one of the figures of their choices. And so it went on like this. And then after that, I was invited by the Office of Arts and Culture to speak on Seattle TV to the city councilman about the project. And that was really interesting. I had to give a presentation about that. And again, this year, I believe that will happen again.
Well, so, I guess the stereotype that is in my mind of, what an artist is, or a painter, is that they, and by the way, that the planes that you're hearing in the background, we're actually on Lake Union in Seattle.
Yeah.
And there's water planes taking off and landing. This might not be the best location for a podcast,
yeah.
But just so the listeners know what they're hearing, we're not at SeaTac right now recording this. But my stereotype of an artist in my mind is someone who's very reclusive and solitary. Their existence is very, they're alone a lot and they're not in the community. And what you've just described to me, that trajectory since 2017 when you decided to start painting, is that you're in the community and you're not just, you're doing the interactive art, you're doing art therapy. And it's a very broad outreach to connect with people and get them to connect with art in general, and also,
yes.
Of course, your art.
And I could tell you why. I am not creating just a painting that you want to hang in your living room. That's not what I'm doing. I do that. You could do that with it if you want to, but that's not my goal. I'm not this machine who would just sit in the room just to paint a painting that would hang in a living room. I wanted to do more with my art. I enjoy that response from people. I enjoy engaging with them. I enjoy pulling them in to look at art and discuss local politics. Taking them somewhere else in their brain, having them think about something else, challenging them, challenging their views, teaching them how they can use it. Instead of, I don't know, if you're angry and instead of breaking something, you could actually paint. You could just take a lot of paint and just slap it on this canvas, and that would feel good,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it, obviously. There's different kinds of people. There's different kind of artists, and there's artists that just want to sit in their room, focus on this one painting and do it to the best ability, however. But for me, the creative process is a dialogue between me and my audience. And if I can't have that, then I can't be creative.
Well, speaking of a dialogue with your audience, between you and your audience, I started following you on Instagram, and I get these notifications about your Instagram live feeds now, and they're wonderful, by the way, because it was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night a week or two ago, and I get this notification, and I turn it on, and there you are, or your hand is anyway, and you can see you working. Yeah. I mean, there's the canvas, there's the paint, your brush, your hand, and there's this. I think there's music in the background.
Always, it's a party.
Yeah,
it's always a party.
And I was like, this is so cool to actually see this being made in the moment, and in that type of connection with your audience, or with your, I don't know if you call them your audience, but your fans, your followers,
viewers, collectors,
right?
Yeah.
And very impressive followers too. I mean, 18,000 people on Instagram are following you.
I have a lot of followers from the Middle East.
Yeah,
from Iraq. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And are you finding that the feedback that you're getting from the Middle East, if your followers in the Middle East, is mostly still positive, even though
a mix. Yeah, I think it's a mix. In the beginning, there was a lot of backlash,
right?
About why do you paint sexuality? Why can't you just paint at they start to kind of suggest what I should be painting, and I kept on telling them, I don't care what you think. I do what I want. I don't care what you think. And I kept on telling them that. And I'm like, and then, at one point I wrote a post. I explained that, this is art, pure art. This has nothing to do with religion, customs, or anything. It's a pure form of art. It is free from any judgment, from any societal restrictions. And if you are looking for that, then you're more than welcome to unfollow me, because this is not a place that we're not going to sit here and talk about religion and our Middle Eastern, culture and all these. We're not doing that. So I had to kind of make that clear to them several times. And there's a really healthy dose of positive feedback from the Iraqi community that I was quite taken by it, to be honest with you. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And push forward, do what you want, do what you love. We love your work. We're here. Let's see more of your work. And they just love it. And so I decided to focus on those people and just kind of let people be. If someone has a negative thing they want to say, then it doesn't really faze me. It used to bother me a while ago. I would say a few months ago, but then I just kind of got over it quickly. And I'm just like, everybody's going to view things from their own perception, from their own upbringing and environment and background. And I just can't blame them, because they're in a different region of the world. So I get it. And I'm just like, you don't like it, unfollow. Or you could stay and watch me paint.
Well, and isn't one of the goals of an artist, just generally, and I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but, it's not necessarily to create something that, the person looking at the painting said, this is good or this is bad. Mm-hmm. That there's what you're trying to do is evoke some type of emotion, even if it's anger. Haven't you succeeded in some way?
I have. And I think I succeeded not because I am painting with the goal to get a response,
right?
But because I am painting from my own response to some emotional experience I have. And so because it's genuine and it's true and it's coming from a real place, people can't help but see it. It's not staged.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I can't stage that. I wake up, this is me, this is what I do, that's how I think, that's it. This is like authentically. I live authentically. So everything I paint, everything I do comes from a very pure, genuine place. I can't necessarily, I do like the theme of the paintings that I just did about the amorousness of the female figure, of the motherly figure, or Atari pains. Generally I have a theme, for example, for a show. But when I paint each painting comes from an emotional experience I had, and I reflect back on it.
Do you find that when you're living authentically and you're working authentically without a lot of goals in mind, but you just, you want to do what you love, that you find that the business aspect of painting kind of comes naturally, or do you still have to put effort into the business part of it, like selling your work so that you can, continue to paint and, earn a living?
There's definitely a business aspect of it. I launched my online store where people can go and purchase prints, high quality prints on phone covers or tote bags or canvas prints. I work with collectors sometimes who want to buy a certain piece. So there's definitely a business aspect to it. But you have to keep in mind, I've been doing this professionally for a year and a half only. So I'm still in the, I would say, emerging artist stage. And I do know that these things take time. So it will take some time for me to get to that nice financial situation with my art. Now I have some goals. Some I share and some I don't necessarily like to share. I don't create art with the mentality of I want to sell it. I care about creating art that is genuine, that is true, that is really saying what I want to say. I'm just really telling a story all the time. And I'm not so much immersed in the business aspect. Maybe I should be. Maybe I should. But I think networking, reaching out to galleries, updating my website, keeping in touch with collectors and things. I think I do that already.
Do you find that when you're doing interactive art and you're, art therapy, you're talking art therapy with community members, do you find that the business part of your professional life comes more naturally because you get more exposure that way, even though you're not intentionally, it sounds like you're not intentionally doing community work because you want to make more money. That's really in your heart what you want to do because you think it's the right thing. But do you find that when you're doing the right thing for you authentically, that you end up just being more financially successful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I heard this thing the other day. The universe is willing to play with you if you are willing to play with it. And I think it's true. So I think if you are open to receiving, and I think if you are genuine and honest and just have a good, pure heart and you're really putting, it's energy, right? Energy in, energy out. So I'm not cutting any corners here. Like I said, I have arm pain. So I am working hard, and I do try to do that and network. And I think, yes, this outreach helps. As an artist, I think trying to get your work out as much as possible is crucial. People knowing you in your area is crucial. When I receive an email from a fellow artist who's way more established than me saying, "Hey, Hiba, I was in an Uber today and the Uber driver pulled your account and showed me your work. people really know you in Seattle. When I hear stories like that, I get like goosebumps. Like that's so rewarding. It's so rewarding. You can't put money on that. And so, me being a Seattle-based artist is something I'm actually very proud of. I grew to love Seattle. I didn't really like it in the beginning because of the clouds. I really love the sun, but I grew to love Seattle. I grew to love the people in Seattle. I grew to love all the streets and the little areas and the summers here. And I attribute a lot of my art to Seattle, and I feel like it brought it out of me. There's something about the culture here. I can't quite put my hand on it, but it's very rewarding for an artist. There's that audience who's very educated, open-minded, receptive. Yeah, and that's just, it nurtures your soul.
I noticed that about your crowd last night.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody I talked to, fascinating people, smart. They appreciate art. And I come from Central Washington, where I think it's probably a lot more challenging for artists to find an audience. And probably more challenging to be inspired because, you don't have people seeking out artwork there very often. And maybe I'm just not looking in the right places over there. Do you have advice for listeners who don't live in a city like Seattle, but they want to create and they want to get their work out there and be seen by people who appreciate art? What should they be doing or focusing on?
Yeah, there's callforartists.com, I think, or something like that. Like you can do a simple Google search about Call for Art, and there's so many galleries that put out national art calls, and you can submit your work and ship it to these galleries, and that way you get exposed. You get exposure that way. If you're not able to physically attend the opening receptions of ideally, let's say you apply to a bunch of call to artists and you submit your work and it gets in and they tell you, hey, we have an opening reception on so-and-so date. Try to go. Go stand by your work. Have a smile on your face. Talk to people about your art. Explain, or don't talk about your art. Just say, I'm the artist, and talk about something else, but just try to be there, because I think that's very important. I think it's very important that people can know you as a person and have your art there, talk to you about your life and your art. And that is a much better connection than just seeing a painting on the wall that we don't know. This is more personal and this is more impersonal. So if they are able to do that, that would be great. Locally, they can show their work in local colleges, community centers. I'm not really sure how remote some of these areas are, but it all depends. But I think, generally speaking, everywhere in the US, I think in every city, there's a room for art and artists to show their work.
What's next for you? Or do you have a plan?
Ultimately, my plan is always to become a better artist. That's always something. In the immediate future, I have another show in May, the interactive art show with the Office of Arts and Culture. But other than that, just paint, apply to more shows, have another show.
And where can they find your work in May?
At ANT Art Nut Terminal Gallery. It will be the first Saturday of that month. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so the theme of the interactive art event will be art and mental health awareness. Yeah. So you can come and paint, basically.
Hiba, last night when I was at your show, we had the opportunity to talk about a project that you are involved in with a professor of photography out of New York. Is it New York University?
Yeah, NYU.
NYU?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Wafa Bilal is a fellow artist and a friend of mine. He's an Iraqi American artist, former professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and currently an associate professor at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. He's best known for his work Domestic Tension, It was a performance piece in which he lived in a gallery for a month and was shot by paintballs remotely by internet users watching from a webcam, and for his book, Shoot an Iraqi, Art, Life, and Resistance Under the Gun. Based on that performance, which details the horrors of living in a conflict zone and growing up under Saddam Hussein's regime. So we kind of speak the same language. We come from slightly different generations. Mine is more, the Gulf War, and his probably a little bit before and after. But we're both Iraqi American artists telling the story of our heritage, of the pains that we went through. We're storytellers. And he's a conceptual artist, more than me as a painter. And as I explained earlier, I have a science background, studied the heavy sciences. And so I was approached by him to collaborate, working on a project that would preserve culture. So as you know, ISIS had destroyed the winged bull, Lamassu, and the winged lion in Mosul. And as Iraqis, we were all very triggered by that because that's our heritage. This area is the cradle of civilization. These are historical monuments that got blown up. And so his attempt, he wants to store the data on how to recreate these sculptures in a timeless manner. And so we dabbled into data storage in the DNA of plants. And my piece was, that was his concept. It's his creation about how to store the data. So we got the scans. He got the scans from the Metropolitan Museum of Art for the winged bull of Lamassu and the winged lion. And
these are laser scans.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then we have another person collaborating with us who's a programmer, and he's going to take this data, put it into Morse code, and then my piece was to figure out how to get Morse code inserted with synthetic DNA into the DNA of plants. And we chose wheat because it was first found in the region of the Fertile Crescent in Iraq, essentially. And so my piece was the science part. That was my contribution to the project, which is to kind of suggest, write an experiment, how to do the experiment of taking Morse code and how to, take that and put it into the DNA of plants.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it took a little bit of trial and error and a lot of research, dry research on my part.
Yeah.
And so that was my contribution, basically how to insert this information into the DNA of plants and essentially have it in the seed form where you can just purchase it from anywhere and plant it. And you'll have this little tree that actually has data. This is the future of data storage because eventually we're going to run out of space to store data. So the future of data storage is storing it in the DNA of plants. People are already doing it with tobacco plants. They already did it. It's also building on, there's a professor at Harvard, I think his name is Church. He already suggested that, and he wrote a book called Regenesis about synthetic biology and synthetic DNA and data storage. And he stored a bunch of books and things like that into plants. So people had already started doing it.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're trying to preserve culture. This is what we're trying to do. So we're trying really hard to preserve our culture. And imagine the future. You could have seeds that have the information on how to rebuild the Lamassu.
Oh my goodness.
the bull, the winged bull and the winged lion, in Mosul and any other things. And so right now we're at the stage of finding someone else to collaborate with us, a lab or a university that would actually make it come to fruition. So we have the person who would do the data programming, who would convert the scans into Morse code. And then I would take those, we would take these and then we'd combine them with the nucleotides, like let's say 00 would translate to guanine, 01 to cytosine. These are the 4 nucleotides of DNA. And so, you could do also synthetic DNA and get it inserted in there. And then there is a way to preserve it with controlled temperature that it doesn't deteriorate over time. So there's all these benefits to it, And so we're all set to go, waiting for one more person to collaborate with us to actually make it come to fruition.
Amazing.
Yeah, we have the scans from the Met, so everything is set and ready to go.
And so if listeners want to learn more about that project, is there a website they can go to, or is that yet to come?
That's yet to come.
Okay.
Because we are searching for the last collaborator, which would be a university or a lab or, like a science biomedical lab that can make it come to fruition. So I think once we get to that stage, then we will have a place where you can maybe just get the seeds yourself. And
I'm sure once this happens and you find that last collaborator, you'll post this on social media so your followers
There is a possibility of actually rebuilding it back in Iraq as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It is actually.
Well, so you got your show in May coming up after this current one. Yeah. And then you also have this amazing science,
and that's where my science degrees came in.
Yeah.
It was art and science merged together. That's art is not restricted to just painting.
Rebuilding ancient societies.
Preserving our culture.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is so cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you.
All right. And where can listeners find you on social media?
At Hiba J Art Studio, HIBAJART Studio. And that's Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Pretty much.
Great. How do you feel?
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the DreamPath podcast. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to your favorite podcast service and give me a rating and review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. I appreciate your time, and as always, go find your dream path.